Hello, everyone. I'm Anita Vogel, along with Nicole Sapphire, Guy Benson, and Gianno Caldwell. And welcome to the Big Saturday Show. The big story tonight: President Biden's possible 2024 re-election bid. First Lady Jill Biden now says her husband is, quote, pretty much ready to announce his re-election campaign. Watch.
Is there any reason for any of us to think that he is not running again? We've heard him say several times that it is his intention. It is his intention to run.
Are you not believing this, Darlene? I mean, how many times does he have to say it until you believe it? Well, he says he's not done. He's not finished what he started. And that's what's important. And I think, look at all that Joe has done, has accomplished. I mean, he brought us out of the chaos. And he did that. He was elected because people wanted steady leadership. And I think they saw that in Joe, and they saw his character.
So is all that's left at this point is just to figure out a time and place for the announcement?
Pretty much.
Okay. But still, top Democrats aren't convinced. According to Politico, his top aides and potential Democratic presidential candidates are mulling Plan B. All right, out to the table. Good to be with you guys today. Good to see you again. Yes, happy Saturday. A lot to talk about. Okay, we're talking about President Biden. Will he or won't he announce his re-election bid? Why don't we listen to what he has to say? He recently sat down with ABC News and broached this subject. Let's take a listen to that.
Let's put this in perspective. Within 2 hours of that derailment, the EPA was in there. Within 2 hours. Every major agency in the United States government that had anything to do with rail and or cleanup was there and is there. In addition to that, I've spoken at length to the congresspersons, the governors, the senators from both states of Pennsylvania and in Ohio. And I've made it clear to them anything they need is available. We'll make it available to them. Whatever happens here, we got to understand it's the responsibility of the railroad company.
So do you plan to travel there, and have you talked with the mayor?
I can't recall whether I don't think I've talked to the mayor. I've talked to everyone else there, and multiple times.
Okay, well, that was President Biden talking about the train accident in East Palestine, Ohio. But he did talk about his potential presidential bid with ABC News. And he basically said, I'm still mulling over a decision. I still have more to do. And I'm not quite ready to make an announcement yet. Very confusing. Gianno, let me go to you first. When you hear the president and when he talks about, I'm not quite ready yet, but I'm thinking about it and I have more to do. What are your political ears hear?
Well, I mean, I'm hearing conflicting messages between his wife and him. Yeah. I'm not quite sure yet, but one of the lines out of what she said, which was, he hasn't finished what he started yet, is terrifying to me. What did he start? A disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan that endangered the lives of many Americans and Afghanis who helped us for decades? What did he start? A border crisis that allowed 5.5 million people into our country that we know about, not to mention those who have gotten away, who've brought drugs into our country, to the impact that for the first time in our nation's history, we've had over 100,000 people overdose from a drug. What did he start? An inflation crisis that he made worse. Food insecurity. I mean, Joe Biden has become indistinguishable to the Grinch that stole Christmas in looks and policy. So I don't know what to think about Joe Biden anymore, but he needs to get right on the right train because Americans aren't with him right now.
The country is certainly facing a lot of problems right now. Guy, when you hear the First Lady say pretty much all that's missing is the time and place of the announcement, do you think she's pulling the levers behind the scenes? Or what do you think is going on there?
She sort of hedged on that. She wasn't totally committal in that answer. And I agree with Gianno. When you hear both Bidens talking about how he needs to finish what he started, it almost feels like a threat based on what we've seen over these last 2 years. Now, when they say, we're not done yet, we haven't finished, you could make the argument, parsing this, that he's only through half of a term, right? They're giving themselves still a little bit of wiggle room. Some of that is legal. They can't talk totally like they're running again because then that triggers certain laws. But my guess is they're either going to have to announce this pretty soon or the buzz is going to build and build and the outside contingency planning of other Democrats will start to really ramp up. Because right now, everyone's kind of in a holding pattern, waiting to see if the incumbent president is going to run again, which they keep hinting he's going to. But I think a lot of Americans watch this president every day and they wonder, can we really deal with this for 6 more years?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of Democrats aren't necessarily thrilled about that prospect.
Yeah, a lot of Democrats waiting in the wings to see what he does. But I want to take a look at a poll. This is a recent poll from Norco. AP and NORC poll. Let's take a look at these numbers. They're not very attractive for the president. These are Democrats on whether he should run again. Only 37% say yes. Look at that, 62% say no. Dr. Sapphire, he just had his physical. He was given a clean bill of health, but he is 80 years old and would be 86 at the end of a second term. What are your thoughts on that as a physician?
How did I know we were going to go?
You knew it.
So
you knew
listen,
it.
History tells us it is likely that Joe Biden will run for re-election. It was in 1876 that Rutherford Hayes says, reform could only be accomplished by a president not tempted to promote re-election. And he was essentially the only president who didn't seek some form of a second term. So history tells us most presidents will look for a second term. But this is different, as you're pointing out. He will be 82 when this re-election happens, and that already exceeds the life expectancy for a male in the United States. Right. So while the vice president doesn't usually have much weight in these campaigns, it certainly will in this upcoming re-election campaign. And I can tell you, when they're looking at this VP, if history tells us anything, Kamala Harris did not do very well in her own primary campaign. Americans rejected her because she could not come down hard on an opinion for anything. And I'll tell you, her popularity has certainly not gotten any better over the last couple of years. In fact, it has gotten worse. And when people ask, what does Kamala Harris stand for? People that say, I have no idea, because she stands for nothing and she fails at everything that she's been given as a task.
Well, and you said Americans rejected her. Democrats rejected her, right? So overwhelmingly that she didn't even make it to Iowa.
You took the words out of my mouth.
And so
never made it to Iowa.
You have to think about her, and you look at the combination of this president and this vice president. We heard from the First Lady in that soundbite that we played that the American people have been craving steady leadership. Is that what the American people would describe what we've all witnessed for the last 2 years? I would wager most people would say no.
Well, going into this re-election campaign, President Biden at this point is not wholly transparent about his cognition. He doesn't give any full cognitive exam during this physical. It's really just, smoke and mirrors when it comes to this physical that just came out. The constant gaffes, unless he is wholly transparent about where he is at mentally and physically, I think Americans are going to have a huge concern about re-electing an 82-year-old man with a VP that they have already rejected once.
Okay, we showed the headline from Politico before, but now I want to go ahead and show a quote from that article. Let's put that up on the screen. It says, quote, his indecision about this decision has resulted in an awkward deep freeze across the party, in which some potential presidential aspirants and scores of major donors are strategizing and even developing a plan B. Okay, well, I made a list of some potential suspects or candidates, if you will. We've got Gavin Newsom, governor of California, J.D. Pritzker, Pete Buttigieg. You can't leave out Kamala Harris. You can't leave her out. Phil Murphy, Bernie Sanders, Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren, and the list goes on. Gianno, you tell me, these folks who are thinking about running, what are they doing right now behind the scenes? They can't get out there. So what can they do quietly behind the scenes? What do you think they're doing?
No, I think they really are waiting, but just in case something happens with him where he can't run, yeah, sure, a lot of people would jump in line for sure. But what I think the Biden is not indecision. I think he really wants to run. And the reason I believe that is because they changed the primary calendar, attempting to change the primary calendar to South Carolina, where a lot of African Americans were the reason for him actually winning the primary like he did. And that's been the case since the 1980s, since Jesse Jackson has ran. So at this particular time, I think it's a wait and see. I believe that he's going to run. I think he already knows that he will. But as you mentioned, we never know because of his age and his cognitive ability, I should say. You just never know in this situation.
No,
it's a rare case.
Karine Jean-Pierre says he intends to run. That's his intention. But that's a wiggle word, right? He could get out of that.
Well, listen, there's this is not a political statement whatsoever, but this is just general public saying this. Gavin Newsom, shouldn't he just be immediately disqualified from running? The fact that under his tenure, they've had the massive exodus of people leaving California. If people don't want to be in the state you run,
one of them, actually.
Why would we want him to run the country? Right. Obviously, he's been a failure at that.
Yeah, first time ever under his leadership that California lost a congressional seat. Guy, real quick, last 5 seconds. If President Biden does announce his re-election bid, does he keep Kamala Harris on the ticket or does he trade her for someone else? 5 seconds.
Really hard to kick a person of that profile off of your ticket, given the identity politics streak in the Democratic Party.
Absolutely agree.
Okay.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.